when you have these shocks to a given market, it's challenging, but it definitely opens up opportunities for some vendors who might move quickly, figure out what the market needs, and rush to the opportunity. I'm proud to say that I think TripActions falls into that category in a big way.
Carlos, what's going on, man?
How you doing? Good to spend some time with you, Scott.
Absolutely. It's between you and Andrei. We got like the meeting of the Miami minds here.
Yes,
I love
indeed.
it.
Indeed.
Carlos, so we're gonna start this off with an icebreaker.
Okay.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh wow. I think you want to make it fun, but I can't not answer it honestly. I want to die knowing that I helped people truly, realize their potential and accomplish things that they wanted to in their lives, and I find that super rewarding. And so, if later in life, as I'm looking back on my career, the more I feel that I've been able to do that, the better.
Wow, man, that's awesome. I love just like diving in and getting deep. And, honestly, some of the companies that you have been a leader at that have been wildly successful, whether it's MongoDB, Dynamic Ops, Vera, there's no question that you've done that. And I know you have a whole lot more to go. That's a really cool answer. And I think, you guys have you've probably had a more interesting year than most when it comes to your business, just by nature of what you guys do. And so let's talk about that, because I think it's a pretty unique opportunity to learn. And also just a lot of leaders I know have probably gone through the same thing. So just to paint a picture, I would love a 30-second, here's what TripActions does. And then COVID went down and, oh shit, this is what TripActions needs to figure out.
Sure. Yeah. So TripActions is a young company, about 5 years old, and the founders are not travel people, but they were road warriors who traveled a lot on behalf of technology companies, and they reached the conclusion that the travel industry and how travel is managed by companies was fundamentally flawed, and they thought that there must be a better way, and they jumped into it and they founded a company. And 4 years later, it was an extremely fast-growing company, one of the fastest in the history of Silicon Valley. And it was a company that I think a lot of why it was growing so quickly is because it was touching on a massive market. Turns out there's $1.5 trillion spent globally on corporate travel. So they were touching a massive market that had not really benefited from innovation from tech in like 20 years. Like the next newest meaningful player is are companies like Agencia and Concur, who were built either at the beginning of this millennium or at the end of the previous one. And so sort of for 20 years, this massive marketplace had been neglected by tech. And so they really touched a nerve by bringing a modern, compelling offering to this marketplace. I'm happy to tell you more about it later. And as a result, the company grew very, very quickly. One of the fastest, as I said, in history. But then, the company evolved into a revenue model where its revenues were derived primarily through booking fees, where when a traveler booked a new trip, that would generate a fee. And so, with the lockdown that happened at the beginning of 2020, revenues came to kind of a screeching halt. And this forced the company to radically to take a hard look at itself, at how we're organized, at how we go to market, at where we invest from a product perspective, at how we talk about the solution. And that coincided roughly with me joining the company. I had only been with the company a little over a month when all this happened. So it's been a challenging year, and a lot of times when you have a big challenge or a market disruption, I think you get a new order or a reordering of the players, in the market. You go back to the Great Depression. There were car companies, automotive companies trying to come to market with an automobile. And coming out of the Great Depression, you had Ford, GM, and Chrysler. And if you go back to like the early 2000s, there was a struggling e-commerce company that had like 6 months worth of cash, and 9/11 happened, and they figured out that there was a real opportunity there to help companies have a backup data center and do disaster recovery in a very cost-effective way. And that's where AWS was born. And here we are, 2 decades later, it's 70% of the profits of, the largest company or one of the largest companies on the planet. So when you have these shocks to a given market, it's challenging, but it definitely opens up opportunities for some vendors who might move quickly, figure out what the market needs, and sort of fill that need and rush to the opportunity. I'm proud to say that I think TripActions falls into that category in a big way.
So I imagine there's the initial shock, aftermath, damage control, how do we take care of our people, et cetera. And then in terms of like opportunity identification and silver lining, like it would be great to understand like where your head went and ultimately what were the main areas that you saw, hey, there's actually a silver lining here.
Yeah, sure. If you go back to March of 2020, I had only been with the company for a couple of months, and those were dark days. I was definitely scratching my head and asking myself, was I at the right place? Had I made a mistake? And, an old saying of my mom's kept playing in my mind, which is life's not about what happens. It's about what you do about it. And so I couldn't let myself be the person that jumped ship just because things got hard. And I'm glad that that's how it played out, because while March was really, really hard, it forced us to really think about the value prop that we bring to market. And we quickly realized that while it was difficult to get prospects to talk about travel, it wasn't as difficult to come to an agreement that travel would resume at some point in the future. And so then if you believe travel is going to resume at some point in the future, we could argue whether it was 2 months, a year, or 2 years. But if we agree that people will travel, then we can talk about, well, how will it be different? Travel's always been complicated to manage because it's a lot of money. It's a big line item. It's typically the second biggest line item on a company's expense statement. And it's fragmented. Historically, travel teams and finance organizations really just wanted to put controls on their travelers, make sure they don't stay at a fancy hotel, make sure they don't fly first class. And so what evolved was this very adversarial relationship between the company and the traveler. And then what happened as a result of that is that many travelers would just go rogue. They'd say, screw it. I don't want to use the company systems. There's too many roadblocks, too many obstacles. I'll just go on kayak, or I'll go and book my own travel. And then the challenge with that is it gave the traveler the ability to do things quickly, but it left the company with like no visibility because they had to wait for those travelers to file expense reports. And then maybe it's 3 months later. And so what are you going to do? Call Scotty 3 months later and say, hey, why did you upgrade yourself to premium economy? He doesn't even remember that he did it. Right. And so you had this very convoluted and inefficient way of managing travel. And so going back to, kind of April, May timeframe, we were able to really agree with prospects. Hey, what better time is there to fix this mess than now when nobody is traveling? And that actually started to resonate. And our product team did a really nice job of bringing to market capabilities that were particularly relevant in, a COVID and a post-COVID environment. Things like pulling in information from World Health Organization and CDC so that companies could look at, regional outbreaks and define travel policies that took into consideration sort of the business priorities, but also the health or the risk associated with, various locations. We also, accelerated or increased our focus and accelerated development of our companion solution to travel management, which is expense management. We call it Liquid, and it's a modern expense management solution that enables the funeral of the expense report. So
I like the sound of that,
right? And so it lets road warriors just do what they need to do, and the policies, the enforcement of the policy is just built in to how the credit card performs. And there's a mobile app to give them, feedback. And so as a result, they don't ever have to do an expense report. The back office review and reconciliation is completely automated. And that, even in a world where people aren't traveling, hey, they're buying desks and they're buying monitors and they're spending money on advertising and social media. And so expense management actually increased in importance. And so we just came to market with an increasingly compelling solution at the right time, when companies have the bandwidth to look at travel, when they know it's going to be more complicated in the future because of health and safety concerns, and when people are actually spending a lot of money on their credit card. And so what ended up happening, now that we kind of look back, we're recording this hopefully at the end of the lockdown, at least in the US here, it's been actually one of the best years in TripActions history from the perspective of customer acquisition. We signed almost 1,000 customers. We increased our book of business by more than 60%. We tripled the number of Fortune 500 companies that are customers. We had 5 of our 8 best months in history. And so looking back on it, I think we feel really good about the progress that we made, and we're super energized about this next period as travel opens up and we continue to bring innovative capabilities to the marketplace.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, quite honestly, I would have never guessed the numbers that you guys just shared. Like, that's super impressive. And it just has me thinking, if I was to distill down what you just said, so for other people, it's like, in periods of turmoil or shock, what has changed? What is more important? And how do I align my message to that?
Yeah, my message and my solution, frankly. It's not just sales. It's like the engineering team did a really nice job of quickly building just the things that the market needs. And that's really one of the core sort of differentiators. If I think about TripActions, the company, one of our investors is Ben Horowitz over at Andreessen Horowitz. And, Ben talks about how behind the scenes, when the founders aren't in the room, they talk about most of the companies they invest in are what they call Popeye companies, meaning, you remember Popeye? He had one strong arm. They either have really good product and sales is along for the ride, or they have really good go-to-market and the product's got some warts, doesn't really work. It's rare when you have a company that's balanced and has great product and product innovation and great go-to-market. But when you have that and you layer that or you point that at a really big market, you can have a magical outcome.
That's awesome. So this is kind of a nice segue into what I would describe as a hot take. Because you're right. I mean, I think what the cool kids are saying is, yeah, companies need to be more product led today. That's the motion. That's the buying motion of the future. It's how people want to buy. I don't want to fill out a demo form and be interrogated for 30 minutes before I actually see, feel, and try something. And, that has implications for salespeople. It has implications for pipeline. It has implications for a lot of things. And we were talking about this a little bit before the episode. Like, what's your take on companies? All companies should strive to be product led today.
I think they're missing a big trick. I'm not advocating for inferior products or, products that don't work. I've worked at companies where, we sold products that had flaws, and it's really hard, and it puts a lot of pressure on sales execution. But I do think that companies miss a trick when they think, and it is in vogue, they think that, hey, if I just come up with the perfect solution, the market will come to us, and the sales organization are really there just to administer these transactions. It's like a vending machine, and they're just going to, walk customers through that process. I think that misses an important trick, because as products get more powerful, they get more feature rich. Almost by necessity, they also get more complex. And so the value that a salesperson provides is to be able to develop a level of understanding about their prospect's business, their prospect's pain, and their objectives, so that they can present the aspects of the product that they sell that are particularly impactful and valuable to that prospect. And so you can help the customer, the prospect, think appropriately about the product and place the appropriate value on it. In the absence of that, if you have a feature-rich product, your prospect may incorrectly reach the conclusion that it's overly complex and it's more than they need. And that may put pressure on the price. They may not stumble into the aspect of the product that is ideal for what they're trying to do. And so having a thoughtful, competent salesperson there to usher the prospect through that process of discovering and ultimately selecting the product is good for both parties. It enables the company to command a premium for their solution, and it accelerates the evaluation and decision process and de-risks the decision process for prospects. So everybody wins if you have competent sales along with a really powerful product.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think complexity of product and seeing the value is an important dimension to really, really understand. I mean, especially when you start to deal with bigger companies, right? I mean, you might have a nice little product-led wedge, but that's not, that gets your foot in the door. That's a conversation starter.
Right.
And here's like maybe a more tactical question for you, like in a model that's utilization based and consumption based, which I would argue to some extent TripActions is, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking about what is the role of the salesperson then, where it's like, okay, cool, we just need people booking, like people are going to book flights and book hotels, and that's like kind of, is that an education gap challenge? Is that like we need to get everybody to download the app at the company challenge?
The maximum exchange of value happens when the sales organization is working both bottom up and top down. So working bottom up to drive, strong fans and to find new use cases and to drive groundswell or to build groundswell around the capabilities of a technology, and simultaneously to call high and enable executives to extrapolate this fervor into business value. And when executives understand how all this technology that their people are excited about, how it translates into the company's, or how it impacts the company's top level objectives, that's the best of both worlds, because now you've got the groundswell, but then you have the air cover, you have the resource allocation, you have projects set up, and you basically give this initiative the appropriate sort of resources and oxygen to realize its potential.
Yeah, Carlos, I totally agree. I think you're kind of hitting on a nerve. This is so related to what I'm working on right now, and it's that's exactly how I feel, right? When you're thinking product led, that is what the sales team should be doing, in that they should be inspiring and driving adoption, almost taking on a little bit of a hat of, a CS person, almost like, I mean, that those two jobs really start to converge. they're kind of the Sherpa of the product. They're showing the parts that matter to them. And then they're not going top down at first and saying, hey, this is why you should buy the solution. The conversation changes completely, and they're saying, hey, this is what's already happening at your company. This is why you should care. And they're really painting that story. And I think that leads to much more productive conversations with the top, and a true partnership, right? There's no real salesmanship up front. It's more data driven. And then you can kind of turn the conversation into something of what if we did X, Y, and Z. So I really like that motion.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. With the exception maybe of the sequence. I think the sequence, it just depends on the technology and it depends on the maturity of the technology. If I go back to MongoDB, in the early days, the sales cycles were very much bottom up. Developers would get excited and they'd build cool things. And then eventually, sometimes by itself, sometimes with the assistance of sales, it would get up to executives. But then I think as the company got bigger, as the product got more robust, the sales team was actually able to go in top down as well and really pitch the value of developer productivity. And the ideal scenario was to do both at the same time and get executives excited about more productive developers and get developers more excited about building cool things. And those two things would come together and you could do big deals quickly.
Now, just kind of getting down to the details because, we're in this mode right now where we're literally transitioning parts of our go-to-market to be more product-led, ungated free trial. You don't got to go through the whole demo thing. You can just get in there. Is the role of that groundswell development and the executive level engagement, is the same person doing that?
Great question. I think the short answer is I think it depends. One of the things it depends on is how technical is your product. If your product's really technical, you probably need two different people to do that because it's unlikely you're going to have a single person that possesses the business acumen and the sales skills and the discovery skills and that ability to translate, customers' objectives into your product and back and forth. It's unlikely you're going to have a single person that can do that and can get down into the details of, the features of the product and how the features can help, say, a technical buyer do their job. Now, if the product is less technical, then absolutely, like at TripActions, that's absolutely the case. The product is complex, but it's not technical. In fact, it's very easy to use. And so our salespeople, can talk to road warriors and road warrior leaders, and then they're talking about productivity and job satisfaction. They can talk to finance people, and they're talking about visibility and the ability to reduce costs. They can talk to HR people, and the conversation is about bringing a really powerful perk to their employees and keeping their employees safe through location information. They can talk to travel managers about the importance of having a globally consistent, robust travel program. Those are all different conversations, but none of them require like a level of technical, knowledge that is beyond the capabilities of a sales rep. And so just depends on the product, I think.
Yeah, I also imagine market segment is an important one too, because I think about this concept of product specialists where they're there for the initial setup and things. I mean, you don't want a $1 million enterprise sales guy spending their time helping somebody connect their initial system or whatever it is. And so you could probably genericize some of the kind of help and help center get started type stuff at the bottom.
Yeah, I think you're kind of picking up on maybe labor arbitrage where you have a more expensive person and a less expensive person. What I will say is in selling to enterprises specifically, the salesperson may not have all the technical knowledge to help some things happen. However, I think there's often a lot of value to that salesperson being in the room, so to speak, whether it's virtual or physical. and really understand the pain and the challenges, because oftentimes nuggets reveal themselves in those really mundane exercises, and those nuggets can have significant impact in terms of the business value of the solution. So I wouldn't advocate for having like an enterprise salesperson say, oh yeah, that's beneath me, I don't have time to sit in on this integration call. There might be gold in that integration call.
Yeah, no, nothing was as powerful as like going back to the person saying, look, I didn't say this is what your person said.
Exactly.
That's awesome. And speaking of the role of salespeople, I feel like there's a lot of people out there today saying, all right, well, we're all on Zoom now. Salespeople can work from anywhere. Hey, we had our best, you said it yourself. Here you are. We had our best year ever. I can't imagine everybody's coming into the office or has not been. And so I think there's a school of thought that thinks that the new world is remote forever. There'll be little office clusters. You can come in, 1 or 2 days a week, or maybe you don't come in. It doesn't really matter. And I think this is another kind of Carlos hot take, if you will. Like, how do you think high performance sales orgs will operate?
Yeah. So that set of beliefs that you just described, I hope deeply that every company I ever compete with believes that, because it's so wrong. Sales, like the thing that makes a sales organization really successful, like the things they do, the things they need to learn, it's just so hard to do. And so to expect that someone is going to be able to do it at their best in isolation without all those micro conversations that happen, the little tiny pieces of feedback. Hey, this thing I just heard you say with that customer, I used to say it that way, and now I say it this other way and it works better. Oh yeah, boom, light bulb. How do you do that over Zoom? Oh, let me go find a 30-minute slot where Scott happens to be available, and then I'm going to talk about this thing that I didn't say very well on my last call. No way, it never happens. And so from a enablement, sort of many to many, peer-to-peer enablement, peer-to-peer motivation, I believe firmly that elite sales organizations have a culture of pipeline generation. To do pipeline generation well, consistently in a remote setting is so hard. We've done the best we could this year, and I think it has a lot to do with why we've had a great year, but we could be so much better at it and so much more effective if people are in a room. Pipeline generation is often, drudgery. You make 20 calls and you get 20 voicemails or 10 wrong numbers, and you only get to leave 10 voicemails, and that can be demoralizing. But if the person right next to you just scored a meeting with the CFO of her favorite account, well, that's pretty inspiring, and that can be just the fuel to go make the next 20 dials. So I absolutely think that sales teams collaborating, sharing that camaraderie, helping each other learn quicker, giving each other inspiration, I believe that's tantamount to a winning sales team and culture. So we're committed. We're going to get back in the office as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah, and when you think about it, Carlos, right? I mean, just the sales profession in general, it attracts people to get energy out of speaking with other people. And that's not necessarily the case for a lot of other roles. And so, right. It speaks to your point perfectly. I think something that you said in that last comment that really got my attention was this idea that really great sales cultures have pipeline generation in their DNA or in their culture. Wow. Can you unpack that a bit? I really understand. I'd like to hear more on that.
Sure. I think it's one of the three key things great salespeople do. But, pipeline generation, and what I mean specifically is AEs. So salespeople generating some of their own pipeline. I don't advocate for, the dissolution of SDRs or defunding marketing. I think there's definitely a place for marketing and there's definitely a place for SDRs, but AEs being responsible for some of their pipeline generation, I think is critical to winning a market. I'll tell you why. First off, the obvious. AEs who are creating pipeline for themselves have more pipeline than if they didn't. That's like, just basic math. Okay, great. Now that we got the obvious out of the way, so what else? Well, the skills required to be great at pipeline generation are very much the same skills required to accelerate a sales cycle. Like when a sales cycle gets stuck, why does it get stuck? Oh, we thought we had a champion. It's just a coach. We need to get to another department. We need to get other people involved. How do you do that? You do that through pipeline generation. It's the same set of skills. And so AEs that become competent and comfortable doing outbound pipeline generation and prospecting become far more effective at getting high and getting wide in their opportunities. Furthermore, once AEs internalize, really get a taste for how hard it is to set up discovery meetings, how many dials you have to make, how well prepared you have to be when you take this discovery meeting to have it flip and become an opportunity. Once salespeople really acutely understand that, man, they take much more care of the opportunities that are sourced for them by their SDRs and by marketing. And so not their conversion rate on opportunities that they don't source themselves is actually higher as well. And so if you zoom out and just think about it from the perspective of taking a market, man, if you have a product that is superior, you need to have a superior. If you have a product that's superior and a sales organization that is proactively going out there and provoking decisions in companies that were otherwise, not going to look at this technology area, you're going to take the market faster. And as a result of taking the market faster, the revenues that the company generates can fuel and can enable the company to invest more in engineering and make that product superiority bigger and bigger and bigger to where there becomes such a moat that no other contender can vie for the market.
I love that. All the AEs out there, man, I hope you are listening. And I agree. That's why I just love being around salespeople with a fire in their belly. They can't help themselves, but try not to set meetings and generate pipeline for themselves.
You know what Mike Tyson says, his secret to success is discipline. And I heard Joe Rogan ask him, like, where does the discipline come from? And he said, well, when I find something that I hate to do that makes me a better fighter, I do it like I love it. You have to convince yourself, almost trick yourself. I love prospecting. I love dialing. I love leaving voicemails. Of course, it's hard. Nobody really loves it, but you got to convince yourself, trick yourself into loving it, and then do it with fervor and enthusiasm. And guess what? That's where you differentiate yourself because everybody else isn't doing it. The lesser reps are generating pipeline. And so you're getting better and you're building more pipeline as you do it. So it's the way to go. Do it like you love it.
I can't help but thinking of like something like drinking water. There's a period in my life where I'm like, drinking water sucks. I want to drink soda. And then I made myself drink water and now that's all I drink. I'm like, I'm not drinking the other crap. Well, we're gonna do one final question, then we got to wrap up. We usually do a lightning round, but we're just gonna do a lightning heavy hitter because we're running out of time here. So Andrei, take us away.
Yeah, okay. So this is a little tougher to select since it's a one heavy hitter. But I think I'm gonna go with, what do you think is the biggest misconception about sales right now?
People think sales is art and engineering is science. They think, engineers, they're really good at math and they're like scientists, and salespeople, they're so gregarious and charismatic and they tell great jokes and they're backslappers and all that. I think the exact opposite is true. I look at what, some of our data scientists and some of the engineers are doing, and they see connections and relationships where others don't. And to me, it's beautiful and it's art, and I don't understand it. And with sales, it's a process. There is a best way to do things. And so it's about codifying that best way, learning it, and then innovating on top of it, and just doing it more and getting better and doing more of it. And so I think there's a misconception of sales as art. Certainly there's a place for, personality and innovating and bringing ourselves and what makes us unique into the sales process. But there are some core, some sort of core principles like pipeline generation, like sales process, like qualification that, just learn the sheet music, improvise later.
I love it. Man, so many awesome lessons in here today, Carlos. And I'm all jacked up. I want to go rip some cold calls right now or something.
Let's do it. We'll go back and forth.
Let's go. But seriously, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really enjoyed it. And I for all the salespeople out here, I think there's some great messages. And I think for all the companies, hey, TripActions, sounds like you guys are really aligned with kind of just the more human way of doing business and serving your people, and giving them, products and applications they like using. So I encourage you to check that out as well. But Carlos, we just want to say thanks for coming on, man. This was really, really fun.
Oh, same here. Scott, Andrei, really good to meet you both. And thanks for having me on. This was a blast.